something that we often talk about internally as the trilemma of self-custody, and that's that it's not actually just about security. We really think about usability and privacy.
And when we talk about threats to those who have Bitcoin in self-custody, we've got three main buckets, right? If you had to rank those three in terms of threat level, how would you put them?
Accidents are a huge category, and it's why we focus so much on recovery. We looked at what happens if you lose each of those three keys. I can lose my phone, I can lose my hardware. What happens if I lose both? And we realized that actually we can solve that too. We believe in Bitcoin as the native currency of the internet. A big part of that belief stems from Bitcoin being decentralized. There's a lot of centralization in mining. There's so many other parts of the equation that we can help with. People needing to throw away machines and replace power supply units and fans just because that's how the machine was built. We're more invested in Bitcoin than most companies out there, and we have a long-term vision around it. We can help get people out of that problem.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Bitcoin News channel. I'm your host, Rob Wallace, and today I am very grateful to be joined by Max Guise, head of Bitcoin products at Block. Back in 2010, when Jack Dorsey first started Square, he said payments should not feel burdensome. They should be beautiful and something people feel good about. Today, Block is trying to make Bitcoin self-custody feel the same way with Bitkey. Hello, Max. How you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So very excited for this conversation today. You have over a decade plus of building in the Bitcoin space, and would love to hear, first off, you have a background in electrical engineering from Stanford. So when you first heard about Bitcoin, how did that color the way that you saw it?
At the time when I first heard about Bitcoin, I was working very deeply on cryptography. So I came from a security background before joining Block in 2013. And I was just fascinated by the underlying technology and the capability represented by it. It was actually before I had worked in the payments industry, so it was a little bit fresher and greener and newer, and maybe at an earlier stage of kind of seeing the potential long-term benefits and effects. So for me, it kind of started initially as a technology interest. And then the more I learned about payments and the more I learned about kind of how that industry works globally, the more I realized that all the things that I really valued from a privacy standpoint and a freedom technology standpoint were also there in a monetary way. And that's one of the things that really helped me kind of take the plunge into working on this full time.
Very cool. Yeah. So you joined Square in 2013, and I was watching some videos of Jack from back in the day when I first started, and it's super cool to see how he was using like an iPad Touch and using the audio jack to solve all these technical problems. But at first, you were trying to make payments fun, easy, and something that anybody could do, for whether it be at a farmer's market or at a big corporation, right? But now the mission of Block has expanded to make a open economy with a Bitcoin foundation. So you've been there this whole time. How did that transition happen?
Yeah, so I think the way Block has succeeded in so many different areas is by deeply understanding customers first and foremost. So looking at what problems are people facing. And so for Square, that was, we wanted to help people never miss a sale. We realized people were missing sales because it was too hard to accept credit cards. They had this incredible Byzantine, wild, bureaucratic set of processes and companies that they had to jump, and hoops that they had to jump through, and fees that hidden fees and stuff that they would get charged. And we found an opportunity to make that far, far simpler for everyone and help them not miss a sale. And then we realized like that's not just a problem that, sellers at a farmer's market have. It's actually, this is hard for a lot of people, and we were able to sort of bring and expand that to more and more folks. And the same is true for Cash App. Like, we realized that like getting a bank account and getting provision with all these things, like there's actually a ton of hoops to jump through. There's a ton of people that are not really helping with that problem for most customers and are sort of taking advantage of people. And we saw an opportunity to make that a lot simpler and easier. And that really resonated with a lot of folks as well. And I think over that whole time, what we were realizing is that, the more open monetary network is, the more people can participate. And the more those people can participate in more ways, and the better products that reach them throughout the entire world. And so to be honest, kind of that whole time we were thinking about and seeing the potential in Bitcoin and really just trying to find the right time to really bring that to folks. And so a big moment for us was, in late 2017, early 2018, when we launched the ability to buy and sell Bitcoin on Cash App. And, the years since then has obviously been a wild ride. Like Block is doing, I think, probably the most in the world for Bitcoin. Like just an incredible number of initiatives and really high quality teams and people driving it forward. And we've got a lot of exciting stuff in the works.
Yeah. And so you being in Silicon Valley for the last 15 years, how has the perception of Bitcoin changed over that time? Because it seems like there's Web3 is a big deal, DeFi, but when it comes to just hardcore Bitcoin, there seems to be some, I don't know, hesitation when it comes to Silicon Valley.
It's definitely been a journey. And I think, for a long time, it really wasn't on anyone's radar. And then I think, I don't think this would surprise anybody, but I think a lot of the things that bring it into public view are price pumps and sort of adjacent crazes. So like the ICO craze and things that are really not what we're building for. And that will tend to bring it into public view. And then lots of people have questions and it causes people to ask sometimes really misguided questions and need to learn about it. And other times really fundamental questions like what is money and what has value and it sets a lot more people off on kind of the journey to understand it. I think with every sort of significant wave of public attention, more people fall down the rabbit hole. And then that results in more people who are doing things like building stuff and coming to Block and working on our team. And it results in more people starting to stack Bitcoin and more people getting interested in self-custody and owning their own coins and having control and understanding. And I think we've seen a lot more of that. And I think lots of things well outside of Silicon Valley over the past years have also really brought that to the forefront for people. Like print enough dollars and everybody starts feeling the results and starts really wanting to understand, hey, maybe that wasn't what I thought at first. And I think we've seen a lot of people go through that journey.
And now you're at a point within Block and all the different companies where it really does feel as if the Bitcoin mission is totally aligned. We just had the big announcement come out a couple weeks ago with Square merchants now being able to accept Bitcoin. So you can go on Cash App, buy Bitcoin through your phone, and then go to your local barbershop, pay for your haircut with Bitcoin. And then when you're done with that and you have Bitcoin that you want to store for the long term, you can take it off and store it in a Bitkey. So this really is just such a culmination of so many years of work. And so what is the feel within the company right now and the overall vision for Bitcoin moving forward there?
Yeah, the feel is incredible. So there's a set of folks that have been working on all the pieces of what you just described for quite a few years. And, some of that's been public, some of that's, we've put a lot of momentum behind more recently. And I think the team is just incredibly excited that we have all of those pieces live and we get to start what I think is a very significant flywheel of people understanding and being able to use Bitcoin. So maybe the thing I would highlight here is that we talk a lot about making Bitcoin everyday money, and there are a bunch of different components to that. Some of those are about making Bitcoin more secure. Things like Bitkey and helping people truly, easily and safely truly own their coins. Some of those are things like Proto, our mining initiative, to make sure that the network stays decentralized and we can kind of counteract a bunch of the centralization pressures that could undercut the promise of Bitcoin. But then there are a bunch of things that are about making it accessible and making it everyday money. And I'm really excited that a lot of those things, like we've really brought to the forefront now. So, with Cash App buying and buy and sell capability, we were really very, very early in providing something that usable to such a wide group of people. Like it's a huge step function, I think, for Bitcoin to make it accessible to that many folks. And then, we're now at a stage where we're starting to bring more of those tools to make it everyday money. And I think that really helps people see the utility. Again, kind of in the same vein as what I was getting at before, it brings more people down the rabbit hole once they have an aha moment. And so really excited about that.
So today's show, we're going to focus on the self-custody aspect. And in 2021, you began leading development on Bitkey for Block. So in this role, you have to think like a spy, right? I mean, you've got cryptography, security, adversarial thinking. What kind of mindset is required for this job? And do you literally go to bed wargaming out failure scenarios?
I do go to bed wargaming out of failure scenarios. We think about failure scenarios constantly, but we'll get to that and we'll talk about how we're handling those. I think there's something really important that I would highlight up front here, which is something that we often talk about internally as a trilemma, or the trilemma of self-custody. And that's that it's not actually just about security. We really think about safety and usability as well. and privacy. And so it's really those three. And I tend to talk about security and safety as kind of interchangeable here. Really, what I'm talking about are the potential for losing funds to an attacker, but also losing funds accidentally. We care a lot about both of those. And so when we approach this, it's not just purely a security problem. That's a huge component, but it's how do we make sure that in practice, all of our customers are in a safe state and we're able to get there easily, and those things are connected. And we're also working on the third part of the trilemma, which is privacy, and is related to the other two. And so we think a lot about all three of those, and every architecture we come up with, the design behind Bitkey, it's informed by all three of those. And there's definitely threat modeling. It's just that's one part of the equation for us.
And when we talk about threats to those who have Bitcoin in self-custody, we've got three main buckets, right? We've got accidents, we've got $5 wrench attacks, and we've got social engineering. If you had to rank those three in terms of threat level, how would you put them?
I'd choose accidents first. And I think maybe backing up for just a moment here, I think one of the things that I'd highlight is kind of fundamental, like why should people care about self-custody, and what are the things that they're risking if they take lean on a custodian. And I think most people have heard this, but I think it's a good reminder for us to say out loud is, they're subject to hacks. Like exchange is a big centralized target, huge pot of money. Like we've seen a lot of exchange hacks. They're subject to mismanagement. So like we don't always talk about it now, but I think it's actually still important in 2025 to mention FTX. Like we don't want people's funds to disappear overnight. And there's a lot of trust that people put in a custodian when they lean on them to store all of their coins. And then the third thing, and I think this really gets at the core of control and the permissionlessness of Bitcoin, is something that I'll call paper cuts, but it's almost a minimizing term because I think it's much more important than that, which is whoever has the keys makes the rules. That's who decides when money moves, to whom, how much, and we want that to be people, not exchanges. And that's really what this is about. And so, going from that to, okay, now it's time to take responsibility and actually take on the ownership, takes you into thinking about the kinds of things that you listed out. And unfortunately, I think what we've seen historically and what we believe quite strongly at Bitkey is that accidents are a huge category. And helping make sure that people can maintain access to their key material over a long period of time amongst all of the things that happen to them in life, that's a really, really big deal for us. And it's why we've focused so much on recovery, making it really easy and seamless to get into a state where you're very resilient against a huge variety of situations, and really easy to do things like set up an inheritance plan that can pass your Bitcoin on to your loved ones. Like these sorts of things often can accidentally be afterthoughts or be really, really hard to set up in a lot of other settings, leaving people in an unsafe state. And so we see this really strong connection between resilience against accidents and how easy the product is to use. The harder it is to set up or the harder it is to maintain, the more you can have an illusion of safety and feel like you're in a great place and not really have it covered.
And overall, would you say that self-custody is going up or down? We had the ETFs launch in 2024. They're the most successful ETFs of any kind ever. So there hasn't been as much of a big push for self-custody, I feel like, in the last year. But I'm sure you guys have numbers on the inside. Are more people self-custodying Bitcoin right now?
Yeah, so I can't talk about numbers specifically, but we've seen an incredible amount of momentum over the past year. And I'm excited by that. I think there's a lot of Bitcoin out there that's not in self-custody, and I think we see a trend that's really, really good on Bitkey specifically. I think you also highlighted something really important though, which is there are industry level challenges. Lots of folks who maybe get interested in Bitcoin primarily for number go up and then look for exposure through an ETF or a treasury company end up foregoing other important parts of Bitcoin and maybe not getting to realize those over time. And I think there's definitely an industry challenge there to work on. But I'm happy that despite effects like that, we're seeing a ton of growth.
Yeah, it's personal responsibility, right? And when it comes to money, it can get scary. But I think that's where you guys come in and try to relieve that fear for a lot of people when it comes to Bitcoin self-custody. So let's get into Bitkey. What is it? What makes it different? And what makes it so special?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd say is it's easy to look at Bitkey and think it's a wallet. Think it's a hardware wallet or a signing device or a wallet companion app. And the reality is it's a lot more than that. It's a comprehensive set of recovery tools. And that's the way we think about Bitkey, is that it's that set of tools that's going to keep you safe. And it happens that there are some familiar components in it. So for example, we have a secure signing device, and we have a wallet companion app that runs on your phone. And we have a third key managed by Block that helps you recover in settings where you've lost one part or maybe more than that of your wallet. And really what we're after is, in 5 minutes, you should be able to set up a 2 of 3 multi-signature wallet that keeps you safe from a huge variety of things. And then you should be able to add to that extremely easily to do things like inheritance. And so the way we design this is built on multisig. And what we wanted to make sure, of course, is that you can always move your money without Block. And so the way that works is you can always do that with your 2 keys in your hands. And Block can never move money without you, because we only have 1 of the 3 keys and 2 of 3 required. And it's not a Block rule, that's a rule enforced by the Bitcoin network, by the actual at a protocol level. And so with that as the foundation, then the task for us was really to figure out, how do we make this incredibly safe in practice for people in their lives? Like, what happens if I lose the hardware? What happens if I lose the phone? What happens if I lose both? And so the odyssey that we went on there was to make all of those things easy in advance for customers. Because I think what typically happens is, this is exactly the point in the conversation where someone who goes and takes self-custody and tries to glue together other products, a signing device over here and a companion app over here and who knows what for the server, like, they're going on an odyssey to design their own wallet. They're having to take on the kinds of adversarial thinking that you were talking about before, and to varying degrees of success. And so what we wanted to do is help people kickstart that journey and end up in a safe state in 5 minutes.
So let's define some important terms before we move forward. We've got private keys, we've got seed phrases, and you guys are seedless. So explain that to the audience.
Yeah, so one of the challenges that people confront when taking on self-custody for the first time, at least prior to Bitkey, is you go through setting up all these tools, and then you're left with a 12 or 24 word seed phrase, and you need to protect that. You can't lose it. You can't let anyone see it, or your money's gone. And it sounds simple. It's a lot of responsibility. And seed phrases end up in people's clouds in plain text and get stolen. Seed phrases end up accidentally read over the phone in a moment of panic, because unfortunately humans have the ability to get tricked by some really talented folks out there.
I wanted to briefly interrupt today's interview to give a big shout out to our lead sponsor, Rhino Bitcoin. Rhino is the all-in-one Bitcoin super app built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Buy or sell instantly. Send sats anywhere on the Lightning Network. Withdraw straight to cold storage. Even turn sats into gift cards or link to a Casa multisig, all within one sleek interface. And Rhino is just warming up. Soon, you'll pay bills, borrow against your Bitcoin, and save for retirement, all without leaving the app. Download Rhino at rhinobitcoin.com or tap the link in the description below. Use promo code BitcoinNews and Rhino will drop you $10 of free Bitcoin into your account today. Secure your stack with Rhino Bitcoin and enjoy the rest of the video.
We wanted to help people take ownership of their coins without immediately getting stuck with that. And the result is we had to go through thinking about all of these different failure modes. So you talked about, falling asleep at night wondering about failures. And that's really how Bitkey started, is we said, okay, well, wait a second. If I wanted to not burden everybody with that problem, like, what do we have to think through? And the number of scenarios is huge. And so we went off to go do that. And the result was, by basing on 2 of 3 multi-signature, we looked at what happens if you lose each of those 3 keys, and we looked at what happens if you lose other combinations of those keys and the tools to get at them. And then we tried to figure out, okay, how can we patch that for customers? And so to give a flavor of the way this works, like, we want to make sure, for example, that, in the case where I lose a phone or maybe upgrade a phone, it should be incredibly simple to recover. And so what we found was kind of in the same way that, a three-legged table is always steady. There are great ways to recover in a bunch of those settings. And so, for example, what we do is at setup time, we take a backup of the mobile key, the key that's on the phone, and we encrypt it with the hardware device. This all happens in your hands, nothing to do with block or block server. It's just a tool we built, and the encryption happens right here. And then what we can do is take the result of that encryption, it's an encrypted backup of your phone key, and put it in your cloud. Doesn't matter if Apple sees it, they don't have this. They have a pretty well-designed cloud setup, so in a bunch of settings, they won't be able to do that. But even if they do, they need this to decrypt it. And so it's really a backup for you. And when you get a new phone or you upgrade your phone, you download the Bitkey app, you can tap back on this, and you're done. And that's it. And we want to make sure that things are that seamless, that familiar. It's not something where you're freaking out all day and can only get to it at night. You can do it right now. It's not something that you felt like you needed to wait till the weekend to set up, or, oh, I'll look at this weekend, and then for some reason you didn't get into it. Like, these things are way more important than that, and we want to make it possible for people to get to it like right now. And so we looked at each of those failure scenarios, and that's what we went after. And then we started looking at, what happens if you lose your hardware device. And we wanted to make it possible for you to get a new Bitkey, and then after a security delay, recover your wallet. And so the way that works is there's still, if you lose a Bitkey, there's still two keys in existence. There's one that Block has, and there's one on your phone. But we also don't want to make it too easy for an attacker who takes your phone on the train or something to act as you. And so we set up a security delay, and customers, when you sign up, provide a communications channel. Email, SMS, that sort of thing. And we reach out to the contact information on file and over a security delay period and give a chance to cancel. And of course, if it's really you and you're trying to recover, you're gonna let that go through, and then you're back in a great state. And a really magic moment for us was we said, okay, that's great. I can lose my phone, I can lose my hardware. What happens if I lose both? And we wanted to think through every single one of these scenarios, and we realized that actually we can solve that too. And so the way this works, and I think this is a big jump. It's a big jump for us, and I think a big jump when we talk to lots of customers. That really kind of unlocks why this system has so much power. So what we do is at setup time, when you opt into this feature, we make a backup of the phone key. And we encrypt it with a key that is held by a recovery contact. That's a recovery contact that you pick. It's not held by Block. It's held by a friend or family member, somebody whose responsibility will be to help you when you need to recover your wallet. And what's underneath this is we looked at this problem. We said, how do most people solve this problem? And the way most people solve this problem is to resort to custodial techniques. It's to resort to things like, well, you gave me a driver's license, and we'll get on a call and I'll look at it and see if I think it's you. And, you'll tell me a bunch of PII, personal identifiable information. Some companies even resort to back-end biometrics where they've stored facial recognition data. And I'm preaching to the choir here. I think everybody knows that this is the type of thing that's going on, but we really that's not what we're about at all. And we didn't want to be anywhere near that. And most people have to resort to that to make systems safe enough. And so what we wanted to do is instead help you lean on your network. We want it to be something that's in your control. And so what we do is, in the case of recovery here, you'd reach out to your recovery contact and you provide them a code that they need to put into their Bitkey app. And if suddenly Rob Wallace looks wildly different and seems like a scammer, they probably shouldn't put the code into their app, and they won't. And when it's you, they put the code into their app, and we're able to facilitate them providing you with the decryption key so that you can decrypt that backup that's in your cloud. And then you're back into a case where you have one key, we have the other, and you can go through exactly one of the recovery steps that we talked about before. And so this was a huge unlock for us. I got really excited about this when we started to kind of figure this architecture out, and we've seen it save a lot of customers. So very excited that we were able to figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of thought that goes into this is really it's mind-bending. So one thing I want to touch upon right now is that when most people get a hardware wallet, they're used to the fact that the first thing you have to do is take out a pen, right? And you need to write down these 24 words. And one thing I heard you talk about that you make such a good point is that then you're leaving all the burden up into the person to figure out what to do with those 24 words, right? Because that is your Bitcoin. The device itself is just signs for the ability for the Bitcoin to move, but your Bitcoin are those 24 words. So was there much resistance in the beginning when this idea first came up to go seedless? What was that discussion like in the room?
I think the thing I would highlight here is that every single aspect of Bitkey we've thought about quite carefully, and we tend to have very open and thoughtful discussions. Like, it's a hallmark of Block. I'm gonna go on a momentary diatribe about Block. So we incredibly transparent within the company. We invite scrutiny. I think that's the phrase I would highlight. We invite scrutiny, and we're transparent and straightforward with ourselves and with our customers. And so when we look at trade-offs like this, like, we just hit hard on what kinds of things we need to figure out in order for it to be a great solution for our customers. And without question, deciding to make this a seedless wallet, like, that was a huge discussion. I'd go as far as to say actually quite a bit of the design of Bitkey and quite a bit of the time we spent on it is actually as a result of making that choice. Like, it's a very fundamental usability choice that's aimed at making things safer and easier together. And almost everything else came after that.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that we've seen in the exchange world and hardware wallets is that you give up your personal information when you purchase one of these things. And then it's sort of a honeypot on the end of the company, right? Where they have your personal information, and then you can be subject to social engineering attacks, phishing, smishing, all these different things. So how do you protect user information once you guys have it?
Yeah. I think the first thing I want to highlight, so there's something really important that you touched on, and I think we'll talk about this in a few different ways related to Bitkey, which is that people end up needing to give information when they purchase a hardware wallet. And they may give information whether they know it or not when they use a hardware wallet. So for example, you need to get a hold of a hardware device. It's got to go to be picked up by a person somewhere. And very often that's at people's houses. And later in the sort of usage pattern of a hardware wallet, you might be connecting it to a wallet companion app that connects to an Electrum server, connects to a Bitcoin node that is controlled by a company that made that app, and may suddenly know something about your IP and the transactions that you're making, and some of the trust model there, I think, is not obvious to everybody, and as a result, like, there actually are a bunch of entities in the chain that know something about whether or not you have that wallet and maybe what you're doing with it. And we've thought a lot about this at Bitkey, and it's actually a really hard problem because we focus so much on safety and on usability that, like lots of others who tried to build in this area, like, that can sometimes mean trading off privacy for a period of time. And that shows up in a couple of ways. One is personal information, and one is stuff like balance and transaction information. And so at Bitkey, there are a couple of things that we're working on that we're really excited about, including one that we just started talking about live on Twitter. And that's, I'll talk about kind of the first part of this first. So one of the things that we introduced was the ability to pay with Bitcoin. And we're also working on the ability to do pickup at stores around the country in the US. And part of what's behind that is we want it to be easy for folks to go get the hardware component of this wallet without having to provide physical address information. You talked about wrench attacks earlier, something we care a lot about, and we're working on it, and I'm excited that that's the case because I think this is really important to me personally, and it's important to our customers. And then the second thing that I want to highlight that I think is really, really exciting, is really the biggest thing on my mind right now, is something that is a new bit proposal that a current and former team member just released. It has a very technical name. It's called Chaincode Delegation. And that's because there is actually quite a bit of cryptographic magic happening under the hood. But let me start with what it does. And so, when folks use a multi-signature wallet, it's pretty common for them to have, one of those co-signers might be a company. It might be somebody who, maybe they don't want to know everything about the wallet. And in a typical multi-signature setup, all of the keys have the same power. So by giving a key to a custodian, they know things like what's your balance, what's the history of the wallet, and not just like at a point in time. They have enough information to know all of the past transactions of that wallet. They have enough information to know all of the future ones that will happen. Even if you take the information away, they can still know that. And so we wanted to remove that trade-off. And so we started looking at how could we do that. And the result is something that enables a multi-sig setup where the company actually doesn't, by default, just sit there with an understanding of your balance and transactions. They actually don't know it. And maybe they only see, transactions that are involved in a recovery, for example. And the BIP even has some provisions to eliminate that as well. And I'll talk in more depth about how this works. And what's happening underneath the hood is that all Bitcoin on the blockchain is in an unspent transaction output, or UTXO. And each UTXO is blocked with a key. That key is derived from a seed that I think everybody is familiar with. That process for deriving the key has a number of inputs. One of those inputs is a chain code. And what Chaincode Delegation does is it doesn't give the chain code to one of the multisig counterparties. And so in Bitkey's case, because we're working on adopting this BIP, that means that the Bitkey server would no longer have the chain code, no longer be able to see your balance, no longer be able to see transactions involved in the wallet, except for at recovery time. And the way this works is the phone holds onto the chain code and sends up a very minimal amount of information needed just for a particular transaction when the server is involved. And so most transactions with Bitkey, just these two. It's only when you lose things that you need to rely on the server. And that's because then the alternative option was to lose funds, and no one wants that. And so when you're relying on the recovery features, that's when, the way the BIP covers this, some information goes up to the server. And what we do in that case is we're working on what we call server verifiability, a way to show that the server doesn't log that, doesn't do anything with it other than sign the transaction for you. So what I'm really excited about is this takes us from a situation where we have great safety, we have great usability, and we have some things we'd love to work on privacy, to actually getting all three of those. Like, we don't have to give up incredible recovery features. We don't have to give up incredible usability. We're just gaining on privacy. So I'm really excited about that. Bitkey's, going to be the first to adopt this BIP, and we're really interested to see community reaction. I'm very proud of the team for contributing to Bitcoin in this way, and I think it's going to be a big step up, not just for Bitkey, but for any sort of collaborative custodian or service like that adopts it.
Walk us through that process. You guys offer up this Bitcoin improvement proposal, and you guys can adopt it yourselves and just implement it just for Bitkey, but anybody else can use it as well. How does that all work?
Yeah, so once there's a pull request out there, anyone can go check it out now, and we've tweeted about it today. So if you're not sure where to find it, you can look at the Bitkey official account, which is now at Bitkey, by the way, not at Bitkey official, and find information about it on our blog, as well as a link to the actual BIP. And once the proposal is out there, really what that represents is us saying, hey, we think this is a great idea. We think it would help make Bitcoin better, and we'd love to help other people adopt it. We'd love to get feedback to make it stronger, to make sure that happens. And there's nothing in that equation that means that we need to wait to make things better for Bitkey customers, and so we're doing that too.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, very exciting. And it is kind of scary if you sign up for a multi-sig solution, and then the third party, they know how much Bitcoin you have, they know when you move it, and it's a little weird, a little invasive. So this is a huge upgrade, and very excited to see this move forward. And I hope that everybody adopts it. Absolutely. So let's go back into the designing aspect of creating Bitkey. Talk about the hardware wallet itself. It's a beautiful device, but it has no screen, but it has a fingerprint scanner, correct? So tell us what went into the design and what makes it special.
Yeah, so we think about a lot of different things when we're designing hardware, everything from industrial design, the look and feel of the product, to the electrical architecture, the security properties that provides, the firmware approach and the security properties that provides, as well as things like you mentioned, like the fingerprint sensor, that was important to us because, we talked about one of the first things you need to do is get a pen out when you finish, setting up a self-custody wallet. or start setting up the self-custody wallet. And we wanted to get people out of that. And the things like the fingerprint sensor choice are part of making sure that this is 5-minute setup. People are familiar with, local biometrics that never leave the device, in this case, never leave the hardware, and how those get set up. And what we see is that people go right through the setup, they get done in a couple of minutes, and then they're in an incredibly safe state after that. They're not sitting there with a card that has a pin or a passphrase written on it that now is probably accidentally going to sit next to this thing for a little bit of time and then, potentially be in that state for a lot longer than most people would care to admit.
And what's the most common need for recovery? It's the phone, someone loses the phone. And then what's number 2 and 3? Like what are the most common problems here? Still holding your Bitcoin on an exchange? Well, you're not alone. A lot of people hesitate because the jump to self-custody can feel overwhelming. The hardware, the seed phrase, and the risk of losing it all if you make a mistake. Bitkey fixes that. Bitkey is the hardware wallet from the team behind Square and Cash App. It comes out of the box as a 2 of 3 multisig wallet without the complicated setup of a traditional multisig. No seed phrases to memorize, no worries when life happens. And with a built-in inheritance feature, your Bitcoin can be passed on safely to loved ones. It's simple, it's secure, it's self-custody without the stress. Get 10% off at bitkey.world. That's bitkey.world with the code Bitcoin News. Now back to the show.
To be honest, we see everything. I think, across, and this is one of the kind of the core tenet of Bitkey actually, is that, in the set of recoveries that people might, need to take on, it's all over the place. And everybody's different. Their mode of use is different. And so, it's certainly more common for us to see loss of one than loss of two. But we see all of them. This might actually be a good time to talk about, fortunately, one we don't see as often is inheritance. Maybe to take a step back, like one of the things that we wanted to add to the recovery model for Bitkey is how do you pass your Bitcoin on to your loved ones? And it turns out this is a really hard problem. And it's actually, has not been solved by a lot of services out there. And so our thinking around inheritance was we want it to be as easy to set up and enroll a beneficiary as it is to set up Bitkey. We didn't want it to be this extra process, this thing you need to like put off and maybe help somebody through in great depth. We want it to be self-explanatory, the same way that the Bitkey onboarding is. And so the way this works is, your beneficiary has a Bitkey hardware, so that is one of the requirements because we want people to be able to safely store a key long term. And what better way to do that than with Bitkey itself? Your beneficiary has a Bitkey. You nominate them in your app, or you add them in your app as a beneficiary. You share an invite with them. That invite has some information that Block never sees. So this is actually something that like the app helps you send via text message or whatever venue or method you'd like to. And then they put that code in, and then that's it. They're linked. And the way a claim works, if you were to pass away, the beneficiary initiates a claim, and that starts a 6-month timer. During that 6-month timer, Block reaches out to the contact information that the customer provided at sign-up time, saying, "Hey, there's this inheritance claim going on." Now, if you're alive and it's not inheritance time yet, you'll probably say, "Hey, that's not a good idea. Let's hold off." But in the case where the feature is being used for what you wanted it to be, that timer is going to expire. And when that timer expires, Block can facilitate with its third key moving the money with your beneficiary. An important thing to note here is that the beneficiary doesn't get any permissions on your wallet while you're alive. They can't see your balance. They can't see your transactions. They can't move any money. They can't touch anything. It's similar to what we do with recovery contexts. It's actually a key that's used to decrypt another backup. And this is a really important tenet because lots of other ways to get at this have that sort of fatal flaw. If I wanted to, tell someone, here's how you get into my cloud, and I give them access to my cloud today, they can access that today. And I probably don't want that while I'm alive. And, then all of a sudden now I'd have to go on an odyssey to kind of figure out how do I make sure that in all the settings I want that, my loved ones get that information when I die. And we wanted to make sure that that's just totally seamless with Bitkey.
And when Bitkey reaches out to people, is it all automated? Like, is it just straight emails going to people, or are they actually talking to a person?
It's all notifications via electronic communications. So customers can choose. You have to provide an email. It can be whatever email you want. You can provide an SMS. We also use push notifications. I think the safest configuration is to use all three, but it's up to customers to figure out how to navigate that. Everybody's different and has different needs. But we reach out via those three channels. We don't reach out to customers in person about their wallet ever. Like many other wallets, there are scammers who do, and if you encounter that, it is not us. Like lots of other solutions out there, will have people do things like reach out to customers suggesting that Bitkey launched a desktop app and this type of thing. We don't reach out to customers. Ignore it if you hear it.
And so Bitkey really is a great protection against social engineering, right? Because all these social engineering attacks really require you to hand over your 12 or 24 words. And if you don't have those, then you can't fall victim to this, correct?
Yeah, so this is a huge component of our design. This is something that we're really interested in because we saw people losing money in exactly the way you're describing. People who are up to no good in social engineering circles are quite good at inducing panic. They're very good at making you suddenly fear whether or not your funds are safe and try to get you to provide information or transfer funds. And a lot of people have unfortunately fallen victim to reading all or part of their seed phrase to an attacker or providing it in some way. Or using a poisoned seed phrase, like you get an email and you're told you need to migrate to this one right now, and here it is, don't show it to anyone. And there's so many variations because people are really good at figuring this out. And unfortunately for all of us, like when we're in a moment of panic, we might not think as clearly. And so I think a fundamental observation for us is that this isn't like, okay, I've worked in security, I never get things wrong. Everyone gets things wrong. And what we want to do is try to, when we can, eliminate classes of things. So classes of vulnerabilities is the way we would talk about it in a security setting. And if we can, make it so that somebody can't actually read that over the phone, they can't actually, import something that has been poisoned, the attacker already knows, they can't, give away part of it, then we can eliminate an entire class of social engineering attacks.
That's one thing that I'm worried about in terms of the future and AI is just the impersonation of people, right? You can get a phone call with somebody's voice so that a loved one, and they can say they're in distress and they need money immediately. Send me the Bitcoin. And that's one thing that we need to look out for. So if you don't have the 24 words, it definitely protects you from that. I think that's a great protection. And you as a cryptographer, we just had word come out yesterday that there was some big breakthrough with Google's quantum computer. So this is all based on elliptical curve cryptography. And so do you think that that could ever be broken within the next 10, 20, 30 years?
It's a really hard question. I probably need like 7 more PhDs to be able to, weigh in convincingly. To be completely honest, I think where my head's at is that right now there are substantial challenges to Bitcoin and to our customers that aren't stemming from quantum computing. And so, I wake up every day worrying about, how do we make sure that people are understanding the value of self-custody? How do we make sure that they're able to take control in an easy way that leaves them in an incredibly safe state? And, at some point, I think we'll all need to take quantum threats seriously. I definitely think from a protocol standpoint, like thinking about it earlier is probably a good idea. But from a product standpoint, I think, Bitkey and really everybody building on Bitcoin out there has a whole lot of things that need to be higher in the list.
Yeah, and Bitcoiners, we tend to think in worst case scenarios and wear our conspiracy theory hat sometimes. And so one big fear is that you'd have to flee the country with your Bitcoin in your head. And with Bitkey, that solution becomes harder. So what do you say to people who bring up that question?
Yeah, I do think that one superpower of seed phrases is the ability to memorize it in some exceptional circumstance. And I think it really comes down to trade-offs. So it is easy to, um, you know, think that, oh, okay, I'm going to hold those all in my head and I'm going to try to repeat them every day. And the reality is, for most people, the elephant in the room is accidental loss. It's screwing up. It's disappearing suddenly. Like, how do you do inheritance if you're memorizing it? And I think, for Bitkey, lots of folks move across borders with Bitkey, and it's true that you need to bring a physical device with you, and there's a trade-off that comes with that. And I think for a lot of people, that trade-off is actually not just acceptable, but keeps them safer. And so that's really how I think about it. And I'm a probably unsurprising, but I'm a heavy personal user of Bitkey as well, and it's one of the things I think about. Like, we're very, very lucky, at least where I'm sitting, and I hope it's a extremely unlikely scenario where I need to do that, but this is the right solution for me to have the ability to do that if I need to, and be really safe the rest of the times.
And another disaster scenario is, what if Block goes out of business? I know you guys have taken precautions in this regard, so tell us what happens then.
Yeah. So I also hope that's a very unlikely scenario. But one of the important things for a product like Bitkey is, like, you shouldn't just take my word for it that, we're going to be around for a long time. And one of the things that we did to help work with it, or to help customers with this, is something we call the emergency exit kit. And the idea here is that, if Block suddenly goes out of business, one of the ways you could get stuck is, you've got your hardware, but maybe you don't have the mobile app on your phone. And what if it's suddenly not out there? And that could happen either because of Block going out of business, like we're talking about, but it also could happen if an authoritarian government decides to, compel the app stores to remove it. And so what we want to provide for customers is a way to get around that. And the way the emergency exit kit works is similar to some of our other recovery mechanisms. So we make a backup of the phone key, we encrypt it with the hardware, and we put it in a PDF with a lot of instructions in your cloud. And it's actually in, like, customer accessible cloud. A lot of the backups we've talked about before are not things that, like, you'd go to Google Drive or go to iCloud Drive and see. This is one that you actually see. There's a PDF that you can access, and if you want, you can back it up in other ways. And with that PDF and with the hardware, you can recover your funds. And the app that you use to do that is something that basically we publish alongside every release to GitHub. So Bitkey is open source, and you can see the code on GitHub. You can build the app, verify it, see it's what's on the Play Store. And we also publish a release that can be used with the emergency exit kit. And that doesn't depend on us. Like, other people could publish that release. They could take an archive of Bitkey source and build one. Like, it's not like Block is hosting that or something. And so if Block goes out of business, you take that app as well as the PDF in your hardware and recover your funds. And that process is harder by a lot than setting up Bitkey. And that's intentional, because what we didn't want to do is, we didn't want to say, okay, that scenario could happen. Let's make 100% of customers go through the most difficult setup just so that we can have that solution solved. We said we'll accept making that solution a little bit harder so that most people never have to do it.
And one thing I've heard you say time and time again is that your job has been really just stripping complexity out of problems for customers, right? And another cool thing you guys just implemented is the going straight from purchasing Bitcoin on Strike, going straight to Bitkey. Was that difficult to implement? And what other cool things in that regard do you guys have coming up?
Yeah, honestly, it was a very smooth experience and not terribly difficult for us. So I was glad to bring that out for customers, both for Bitkey and Strike. Also really excited about the kind of opportunity to expand that type of functionality for self-custody customers everywhere. One of the really powerful things, we've integrated with Cash App, and you can buy and sell. You can stack on Cash App, a place to buy, and really excited about things like, on Cash App you can set up direct deposit, convert to Bitcoin, and convert a percentage to Bitcoin, and then move to self-custody with Bitkey. I think that like what we're after at Block is, there are sort of magical experiences that we can provide because of the number of things we do and the number of types of customers that we serve. We can put these chains together that are just unbelievable and don't exist anywhere else.
Yeah, no other company in the world is pushing Bitcoin forward like you guys. And it's really come to the forefront in the last year because you've also released Proto, your Bitcoin mining rig, which you are also very instrumental in helping bring to the world. So before we wrap up, I'd love to hear about you guys diving into mining, what that process was like, and the difference between designing a self-custody solution to building a Bitcoin miner.
Yeah. So for Proto, we got very interested in this because we believe in Bitcoin as the native currency of the internet, and a big part of that belief stems from Bitcoin being permissionless and decentralized. And there's a lot of centralization in mining, a lot. And we started to look at the different components of that problem and figuring out where we could help. And what we realized is, hey, wait a second, we have an incredible team on hardware system engineering and even silicon design, making low-level chips that are at the core of Bitcoin miners. And we're more invested in Bitcoin than most companies out there, and we have a long-term vision around it. And being able to bring together those things plus block resources is really, really unique. And so we got interested in and dove into Proto, and we're building chips. So the actual chips at the core of the miner, we're building hash boards. So these are printed circuit boards that incorporate a ton of silicon, a ton of different chips to hash and to mine. Systems that incorporate a bunch of hash boards and bring power and cooling technology to help manage the heat produced by Bitcoin mining, and then software on top of those. And the space is actually really different than Bitkey. It's instead of staying up at night thinking about how do we make sure that this person, if they lose this, like it's going to be fine. It's very, very deep, like system engineering problems. How do we manage heat? How do we bring together all of these different components? How do we make things easier for customers who are struggling with mining systems that just aren't built as infrastructure, like they're not reliable, they need to be replaced periodically, wholesale, so like lots and lots of parts being thrown out, and just not built to be upgradable. And we've found that we can help answer the call for a lot of miners out there, and so we introduced Proto Rig, which is durable and repairable and upgradable, and we also introduced Proto Fleet, which is basically helps miners manage everything all in one place. So really excited about the trajectory there. Very, very different than Bitkey, but this just helps illustrate the range of things that Block is doing for Bitcoin, and really excited to bring more out in the Proto space soon too.
Yeah, and you guys have been designing chips for years, but when we consider Bitcoin miners and the ASIC chip, are we at the point where it's almost commoditized? Can we get much more efficiency out of these little chips? And did you guys have some breakthrough when you were designing yours?
I don't think we're commoditized. I think that lots of folks in the industry would probably suggest that there's a trend towards that, and there might be. But I think what we're seeing right now is there are definitely gains to be had. And I think the part of our team is, of course, excelling at that. But I think the biggest thing I'd highlight is that it's not so much that ASIC performance is commoditized, but more that there's so many other parts of the equation that we can also help with. And so that's where, people needing to, throw away machines and replace, power supply units and fans and chassis and stuff just because that's how the machine was built. Like, we can help get people out of that problem. People who are struggling with downtime, and maybe when they really go look at the numbers and they really compute how much Bitcoin they produced and what it cost them and all of their operational expenses, realize that, actually there was a lot left on the table if that power supply unit was more reliable, or if it was easier to change these fans out. Uh, and so we've focused on other parts of the equation as well. So it's not so much instead of, it's an and.
And I saw you speaking at the African Bitcoin conference before you released the miner, and you said you were very excited about heat reuse. So if you think about a Bitcoin miner, I mean, it's turning electricity into computation, which produces heat. And so if you think of heat as the main product and Bitcoin hashes as the byproduct, you have a completely different thinking when it comes to this device. So did heat reuse go into the creation of the Proto rig?
So when I was talking about heat reuse, one thing I should highlight here, I was on stage at the time with Eric Hersman from Gridless. And Gridless is really cool. So if you haven't heard of Gridless, I strongly recommend checking it out. What they do is, they realize that in a variety of remote parts of Africa, that there's a really incredible set of things that could come together, and that's using geothermal or solar installations or run of river hydro installations to not just mine Bitcoin, but bring electricity to local areas, often for the first time. And there's a really nice sort of collision of incentives here where Bitcoin can basically serve as a monetization mechanism for installing infrastructure. It's a global monetization mechanism for that. You can earn Bitcoin with excess energy. And for lots of electrical infrastructure, lots of power infrastructure, the use might not be 100%. And in especially in remote areas, or it might be expensive to install, and then maybe the local area needs 20% of the energy. And Bitcoin is an unlock to say we can help pay for it by selling the other 80% to this global monetization mechanism. And so that was part of the context of that panel is we were really highlighting that as like this is an incentive for sustainable energy infrastructure installation, and a lot more than that. And so I thought that was I just think what they're doing is incredible. And one of the things we were touching on is that heat reuse has some of that same potential. So, if you're far enough from the equator and you need to heat your home, then you're going to spend that energy anyway. And so, part of what's behind or what's underneath the sort of profit equation for Bitcoin mining is cost of electricity and cost of energy, and what better cost of energy than something you were going to spend already. And so basically we see some significant potential in that over time. Proto rig is, as you've probably seen, is a large system, so it's not with that system, but it's something we're thinking about.
Cool. Yeah. And do you think that home mining is going to be a path in the future that will lead to decentralization, or is it more just a gimmicky hobby?
Well, I do love BitX, and I enjoy home mining, but I think I am most interested in, and I think we in general at Block are most interested in heat reuse and stranded energy applications for decentralization. I think there's a ton of potential there. I didn't touch on it a moment ago, but heat reuse doesn't just have to be heating homes. It can also be commercial applications. And we've seen folks experiment with our mining development kit, for example, heating greenhouses, heating saunas, stuff like this. And there's an awesome bathhouse in New York that heats that part of the heat for their pools comes from Bitcoin mining. And I think applications like that have a lot of potential for decentralization. I think home lottery ticket level mining is awesome as well, and like a fun hobbyist endeavor. And I think we'll see some things crop up in the middle. But I don't have a crystal ball on exactly what's going to be most important over, say, 3-5 years in decentralization.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to speak to someone like you who touches Bitcoin in so many different ways. When you wake up in the morning, what are you most excited about to work on in Bitcoin?
You can't ask me to pick between Bitkey and Proto. No, I think the thing I'd highlight here is something we touched on earlier in the discussion, which is the number of things that Block is doing is incredible. And so it's not Bitkey, it's not Proto, it's not Cash App, it's not Square. It's the fact that we actually have these through lines amongst all of them. And so was really excited by the releases earlier this month, and we have even more coming. And so, to be honest, my answer changes almost every day as we make more and more progress on these things. And so I think it's really just the whole portfolio and where that takes us and what it does for our customers.
And as someone sitting atop of this structure, what do you guys need? What kind of people do you need in the organization to help push Bitcoin forward?
A lot of different types of people. It sounds like a silly answer up front, but I think, in some cases, it's folks who have extreme vision about how to connect the kinds of things that we're doing, what else we can do with them. Like, all of that vision is built on people who understood Bitcoin deeply, people who thought about customers deeply, and found a great way to help. But then there are lots of folks that we hire lots of experts in a ton of different areas. So we talked about Proto, for example. We have thermal experts, we have electrical engineers, we have people who are excellent at manufacturing tests to make sure that the first rig we build is, off the mass production line is the same as the 100,000th rig we build off the mass production line. We have cryptographers who work on Bitkey. We talked about Chaincode Delegation. We have folks who are thinking really creatively about how to solve fundamental privacy problems, not just for Bitkey, but for Bitcoin. And so, to be completely honest, it's all over the place. It's really experts that can contribute to the many things we're doing in Bitcoin. And I'd strongly encourage, if that sounds great to you, reach out to me, reach out to anybody at Block, and let's talk.
Yeah, super exciting time for Block and everything you guys are doing. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. If people want to find more about Bitkey, Proto, everything you guys are doing, where should they go?
So for Bitkey, you can get one at bitkey.world. And from that site, you can find our blog at bitkey.build and learn more about it. And Proto is at proto.xyz. And if you are interested in the privacy work that we just announced, definitely check out the Bitkey blog. And you can find the bit from there as well. And we'd love to hear your feedback.
All right, Max, thank you so much. We got to check in like a year from now and see where all these different projects are going.
Sounds great.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you could drop a like and a share, it would help in our mission to accelerate adoption. If you're looking for more Bitcoin signal, join over 10,000 readers of our newsletter, Bitcoin News Weekly. Every Monday morning, we send out the biggest headlines of Bitcoin to keep you in the know in under 5 minutes. Links below in the description. Then come hang with us live every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We break it all down live on stream with a new guest, and you can add your 2 sats in the chat. See you next week.